Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Insurance Journal's Academy of Insurance's weekly webinar after show. I'm your host, George, and joining me for the after show is the director of the Academy of Insurance, Mr. Patrick Raitt. Hello, Patrick. And our instructor for today's class. Today's class was the art of ethical negotiations, and our instructor was Mr. Mike Koscielny. Mike, and is our instructor Mike Koscielny. Mike, welcome to the after show. It's great to have you here.
Thanks, George. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. So I know you're a big wheel in the insurance cracker factory. You're very involved in the CPCU and site. Mr. President, congratulations on being the president of site. I was listening to the presentation, watching it, and you told some personal stories and you told some case study stories and business stories about negotiation. When did you first start getting interested in negotiation? You mentioned your father-in-law was very adept at negotiating, and your life, as told to us, you talked about family and friends negotiating. You have achieved quite a bit personally, getting an MBA later in life. So you must have negotiated with yourself to push yourself to do these things. And you also have got a lot of experience both as an observer and in the midst of business kinds of, experiences. So when did you first start getting attuned to, negotiating? When did you start getting interested in the art of negotiating?
Yeah, I think, I kind of related to that a little bit during the session, and that, I got married very early. I graduated from college in May and got married in June. And so I sort of, I think I was probably still in college. I hadn't officially graduated, but my fiance, now wife, we were looking for a car. We had an idea what we wanted. And my father-in-law was very willing to help us with it. And I would tell you, that's probably the first time I actually sat in a room and watched it happen. As a young child, like growing up, there was a appliance store in the Chicago area called Polk Brothers. And it was a locally owned business. And you walked in the door and it was like walking into a car dealership. There was 35 salesmen all standing there with clipboards and books, with the prices. And I'd walk in with my dad and they'd want to go buy, he was buy a washing machine, let's say. So he'd walk in and the first, he would just say washing machine. And one guy would grab them and they walk back to it. And then they start negotiating it. There was never a price on the washing machine, which I always thought was kind of odd. But I watched my dad do it. I'm not sure my dad was as good at it as he thought he was, but my dad was always the low baller. But my father-in-law really kind of triggered that sort of in me in terms of being involved in that whole process. And I would tell you that he did some things that certainly I would never do. I mean, talk about telling the truth. One time we were negotiating for this car at a Honda dealership, and he told the salesman that he was the vice president of distribution for Honda, and that if he sold us the car at that price, he could have 35 cars delivered there the next day. My father-in-law was a farmer. He had nothing to do with Honda, but he could spin a yarn so well that this guy was just lapping it up. But I walked out of there. We didn't buy that car because the sales manager interceded on behalf of the dealership. But it taught me some lessons about how to do that. The silence thing, which I think is really the one that's just so difficult for salespeople to deal with. Quiet after a conversation. It's like you have to fill the void, right? But that's sort of how it got started. And then, things happen over time. I end up in this business. I end up in an opportunity very early in my career where I'm talking to vendors and certainly negotiating with agents on premiums and prices. And I sort of harkened back to some of those experiences with my father-in-law. And I don't know that I've read some books on it, but not really in depth, just enough to get some framework. But this whole presentation was sort of just a look back, I guess, more than anything, about all the experiences I've had relative to that, and try to share some things that I think are important in that process. Because when you're in the throes of this whole thing, you can easily slip into, sort of the dark side, cross the boundary into things that ways that you shouldn't do it. And so, I think you talked about the CPCU society, but we're dictated by a very high standard of ethics, and if we don't act ethically, they'll come take the plaque off the wall. So that's
Sure.
always been an important part of my life, being ethical about that. And negotiation is just a place where if you do it right, everybody wins. And that's ultimately what you want.
Absolutely. And you had asked in the class, do you like negotiating? Do you not like negotiating? And you got a mixed
Yeah.
bag of responses. So I think there's a preconceived notion of negotiation in being something that's in a business setting. I think the Spanish word for business is negocios, something like that. It's really like the perception of what negotiating is. But negotiation is also a conversation. Negotiation is a back and forth. It's a give and take. Why do you think some people actually more of the question would be, since we won't ever know that question, if someone doesn't like negotiation, how can we convince that someone that isn't into the art of negotiation or the pace of it or the tone of it, what would you say to them that would get them on the side of the crowd that likes negotiating?
Yeah. My opinion is, most people think of it in terms of buying and selling cars. Because even the price, there's a sticker. I mean, outside of Saturn, which doesn't exist anymore, there's a price, but that's a suggestion, right? And I think everyone knows that. There's some people that pay exactly what it says on the side, and the salesmen love those people, but most people recognize that. But they think that that's kind of a dirty process, right? That sometimes car salespeople, I think they're a notch above insurance agent. No, I'm kidding. They're probably below insurance agent. But I think there's a struggle sometimes that car salespeople are not the most ethical potentially, and so I think that's what steers people away. And when I talked to my kids about it, I took them, each of them, when they bought their first car, when they were paying for it, I wasn't, which that's a whole enlightening moment in your life as an adult. But I took them so they could see the process and how I did it. And the fact that it wasn't a confrontation, my daughter said, Dad, you said like 6 times to this sales guy that I want you to make money on this deal. That's an important thing to do, right? Because they're in the same boat. They're on the other side of that thinking, well, everybody's going to try and lowball me, right? Like my dad would do, car's $7,000 and he'd offer $1,000. I say, Pop, you're making people mad by doing that. That's silly. Find a place where you think it's best, where you win, they win. So I think that's part of the process. And so I'm guessing that people that are fearful of it are people that have had a bad experience. And so you don't want to repeat bad experiences. That's just not human nature. But it comes down to those 6 steps. And probably the most important one is that first one, being prepared. So it takes time to know what you're going to negotiate, right? But then also have the open mind to say, hey, I did all this work, but I didn't know this, right? Oh, I'm going to get this with it too. I'm going to get free oil changes for a year or forever if I drive an Acura, by example. Well, that's worth something. So, figure that in your cost, how much that's going to be, and then negotiate it, because they're going to throw that in. It's in the price right now. So maybe you can work that out of that and still make everybody happy at the end. So I think that's the fear of being in one that wasn't pleasant. And people don't like to repeat pleasant things. I mean,
Gotcha. No, that makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
A lot of people don't like being disruptive.
Yeah.
Things like that. Sure. No, absolutely.
And then the emotion gets in the way too sometimes, because sometimes that car salesperson is really aggressive with you. And maybe people don't like aggressive people, so they sort of back away from it. And sort of that idea of keeping your emotions distant from what you're dealing with. It's not you. They're trying to do something. It's not you as a person,
right?
But they're trying to sell a car. They're trying to make money. I mean, I've never been a car salesman, but I've negotiated prices on commercial risks with agents and with clients. And, it's not an adversarial relationship. You want them to win, get the coverage. You want to make some money doing it. That's it.
Sure. Mike, this is a historical day in the Academy's history. Well, of course, it's a historic day for us because it's your first after show with us. It's your first class with us, but it's also the first time that the director of the Academy of Insurance, Patrick Raitt, and I are doing the after show from the same room. We are both in attendance at the LAAIA this year. And so before I pass it over to Patrick, I wanted to just mention that it's a thrilling day for me personally as the host of the after show, and also, it's a thrill to have you with us. So thank you for everything
Appreciate
today.
that.
Really appreciate it.
Congratulations on the first. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a day of first. It's fantastic. So Patrick, welcome to the after show. And I wanted to ask you, because you have a lot of experience with writing for MGA and different things. What do you think of the art of ethical negotiation, the art of negotiation in general, and today's class in particular?
So the idea behind ethical negotiation, right? I mean, there were twists to today's conversation that you don't see in your average negotiations training. I've been to the negotiation class that says, well, nobody's going to come away happy. Let's just make sure everybody comes away less aggravated than they could. Well, that just sets the tone for me. Like, okay, this is going to be a miserable process. I'm going to hate everything about it, and I'm going to hate myself when I'm done. That's not the point of Mike's class today, right? I mean, to the place where even doing for the car dealer, the one thing that nobody wants to do for the car dealer is make sure that they get a fair shake in the deal too. The willingness for, in the story he was telling about the where they said, well, let's just finance this, and then you just pay it immediately, and I'll get money and you'll get the car. Everybody's happy. And Mike, your willingness to take that and not allow it to be used as kind of an underhanded tactic against the innocent third party that's not in the room, the finance company, who all they know is the dealer sold a financing agreement. Yay, write check and give to dealer. And they didn't know that they had set them up to get that thing paid off immediately. Your willingness to say, well, let's see if we can do this so that nobody really loses out on this thing. That says a lot. And to me, the key piece of this was can we negotiate ethically? I mean, there's nothing unethical about when the offer is made, where you sit there quietly and not say a word for 30 seconds, a minute. There's nothing unethical about spending your time researching and finding out the facts and getting the best stack of information that you can. It becomes unethical when somebody in the process is not willing to say, yes, this is a good idea. We should absolutely do it this way. They almost like if they have to come to you in secret and say something, that's when you start to have an issue. I thought that was a fantastic twist on the whole idea, because there's so much about negotiations that, I was one of those in the chat. Nope, don't like negotiating, not good at it, not my thing. I have been known to come into a negotiation and they'll push back against this number for sure. And before the number is even fully out of my mouth, they're saying, yes, sign, please. I underbid myself. I'm so bad at it. Anyway, that's not important. Maybe I should pay more attention to the class.
And it's interesting because when I think about that situation, the first part you were talking about with that, it goes back to that reputation piece of things, right? You don't know when you're going to cross paths with these people again, right? And whether they're checking or not, whether or not the loan got 12 months or not. I mean, you can pay off a car loan at any point in time. You don't have to make 12 payments. If you want to make it in 7, you can do that. I mean, there's somewhat of that expectation, I think, in the finance business, but to have 0 payments or have a single payment probably isn't. They probably don't check that first and foremost. But if they did, then they're going to go look back and say, well, who did it? Maybe they're going to go do something to the dealership. But probably more importantly, my name's attached to that. So now I'm complicit in this thing. And that's the last place. You never want your reputation to be sort of sullied by something that it just doesn't float, right? So
Right.
it's that walk away. Maybe that's a deal I probably should have walked away from. I was so in deep to that. And the solution to me was just carry it through. It's a couple $100 more, and it really wouldn't make that much difference at the end of the day anyway. And I'm still getting a good price for this car, and it's done. So
Yeah. Yeah. And when it comes to ethics, a phrase that we used to use at another place where I worked is, don't do anything or say anything that you don't want to have to explain to a camera, to a judge, or to your grandmother.
yeah, I worked for a company, and the claims VP taught this class on negotiations, and he was the one that talked about that sort of being silent. But he always said to me, he says, when you're in that situation, just put these words in front of everything you say. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury. You know, you're prepared to testify in something that, and do you, not that that should be the overriding way you consider everything, that you're going to get sued and go to jail, because you're not. But it goes back to that reputational risk, right? That
Absolutely.
Whether it's an insurance agent that you've done that to, well, they talk to each other, right? I mean, that's sort of the reality of the world.
Yeah, absolutely. If you mistreat somebody in one industry, that does get around, and none of us wants to have a bad reputation.
No.
And you spoke about that as a CPCU thing. There's a reason that ethics training is mandated for insurance agents, and because we're dealing in an industry, insurance is considered a contract of utmost good faith.
Right.
And if we're gonna act in utmost good faith, we've got to be acting ethically.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mike, before we go, I'd like to ask you if you'd like to tell us about Born to Lead LLC, your company,
Sure.
and what you do in context.
Sure. So this was born in, I guess 3 years ago now. I sort of keyed this and got it sort of teed up for knowing my retirement. Really the challenge I came to understand, and I really learned a lot about it as the society president and past president. I visited a lot of companies, and what I found was, as I was talking to them about the society and the institutes and all the things that are being offered, the one thing I heard loud and clear from whether it was executives or in their HR department, but what I heard was, we really don't have the time or the money to teach people how to be leaders. And it was unfortunate, because I spent 20 years of my career working for Safeco Insurance Company, and I ascended into a number of senior level positions there. But the one thing Safeco did was it trained their leaders. It trained us not just how to deal with the day-to-day, how to do a performance review and how to deliver a difficult message and that, but it was more about teaching people, leaders, how to lead, as opposed to managing. And I always felt I was unfortunate of that. And now, today, none of that happens. Some carriers are. I think there's some that are very good at it. By example, Chubb is very good at teaching their leadership how to be leaders. But there's so many others that aren't. And then there's smaller companies that just don't have the resource. They may not even have the people to be able to do that. Our industry is, I think, in dire need of preparing a younger generation now. And when I say younger, I say millennials, and now it's actually probably even Gen Z, to be prepared to step into these roles, because there's a big gap, right? All the baby boomers are retiring. Gen Xers are out there, but even there may be too far into their career, but certainly there's the opportunity. But there's a whole group coming up behind them, these millennials and Gen Zers, that I think thirst for that. They want to be in charge, but they don't know how to do it. And so I think the importance of what I'm trying to do is really spend time. I do a lot of one-on-one work with young people that are in these roles to sort of help prepare them. And I do that just, I don't even get paid for it, which is okay, because to me, the satisfaction is seeing them in those positions. But I think that's a gap in our business. And so that's where Born to Lead got started. I mean, the initiation of that was a presentation I did in 2017 for the CPCU Society. It became sort of who I am and what I do, and it just fit naturally to the point where now I think there's a great chance to get in front of a lot of carriers out there and businesses, insurance agents too. I think there's a big gap on the agency side. There are a lot of big boomer-owned agencies, and I would tell you, many of them are not good managers. They were great salespeople, but they're not managers. So you need to find people in those settings as well. And they don't have the resources either, at least not huge dollars that you might expect out of, a multi-billion-dollar company. So how do we fill that gap? And I think that's the goal that I have sort of set for myself. So that means sort of being at the grassroots. So working with a lot of the RMI programs. I'm working with Olivet College right now. That's an opportunity. They place a lot of young people in the insurance industry as undergrads, but they have a master's program there that, in my view, prepares leadership in a company for senior leadership roles, whether it's at Olivet or Florida State or Georgia or St. John's. I mean, there's a lot of great RMI, risk management insurance programs that have master's degrees. But the ones that teach them how to be a senior level manager, to me, are the ones that have the advantage, because that's the gap that I hear when I talk to. So that's sort of how I ended up where I am right now. It's been, to me, this is a labor of love. I enjoy it so much. It's I've always said, if you do what you love, you'll do more than you ever can say grace over. And that's where I'm at right now. My day is filled, and it's filled with things that I love to do. And so the day goes too fast because I can't get done a lot of the things I'd like to do. This is the beginning of this process for me. And my hope is that as things go on, I'll find some disciples, if you will, some others who want to sort of join this party, because there's a lot of valuable leadership skills that are out there today that can be taught to young people, just like they were taught to me. I'm the leader of who I am today in the roles that I've been in because of the people who led me. And so reflecting back on that is an important thing. And I learned a lot of those really great leadership skills just by observing and saying, wow, that really made me feel good. What did they do? And so I would sit with that person and say, you've really built great trust in me and you. Help me understand how you did it. And most of the time, what they did was somewhat deliberate that could be taught. And I learned those skills from that. So I am if you will, I'm the combination of, about 14 different leaders, probably more, I don't want to leave anybody out, but ones that were really profound in terms of how they dealt with the people they led, that sort of helped me become the kind of leader I am today. And that's the core of what I'm trying to express to young people, that think back, reflect back on those, even the bad ones, because, bad leadership just means don't do it that way, do it the other way, because it would be good. So that's where Born to Lead sort of got its start, and it's exciting for me, and I look forward to continuing to sort of work in that direction.
Mike, amazing. Thank you again for your help today. And you don't sound retired, which is great. We hope that you join us again for future classes and everything. And we're looking forward to more conversations with you and more examples of lifelong learning, because that's what it's all about. So
yeah, absolutely. Really
appreciate your time today. And Patrick, it is great to see you. Normally we have you join remotely to the after show, but and I'm not used to seeing you several feet away from me during the after show, and it's fantastic too. So thank you for coming to the after show.
It has been a great day, and it has been a lot of fun just to be able to connect and work in person and not just talk to a camera, but talk to the guy way over there across the room.
Sorry I wasn't there. I would have liked to join you guys in person too, but
that would have been one for the record books.
Maybe we'll have to set that up sometime. I'm not opposed to traveling.
I'm on board,
especially to Florida.
Absolutely. So again, Mike's class was The Art of Ethical Negotiations. It'll be available on demand starting tomorrow. So Mike, really appreciate your time. Patrick, really appreciate you. And on behalf of everybody, this is your host, George, saying thank you for coming to the after show, and we will see you next time. Take care of yourselves and have a great day, everyone.